There's 104 days of summer vacation, and school comes along just to end it.
We all know the words, and assuming you were a kid when you first heard it, we all know the disappointment that isn't true. No, summer vacation is only 3 months, or around 90 days, long. But with Phineas and Ferb having wrapped up its 5th season, and with another movie on the way, I thought it's time to see if this is accurate even in Phineas and Ferb. So be sure to like and subscribe, because in this video, we are going to answer 3 major questions. Number 1, are there really 104 days of summer vacation? Number 2, if there are, is there any way the first 4 seasons really do all happen in one summer? And number 3, since certain episodes actually do feature dates, can we reasonably make a timeline for the show? Starting off, we have to answer the most basic of questions in Phineas and Ferb. Are there really 104 days of summer vacation? Off rip, your first inclination is to say, of course. After all, they mention it at the start of every episode. The biggest counterpoint to this comes in the form of Milo Murphy's Law, which takes place in the same universe as Phineas and Ferb, and even in the same town, in fact. Actually having a crossover with Phineas and Ferb in Season 2, before just giving up completely and making Doofenshmirtz a main character. Regardless, the point here is that at Milo's school, in the episode Picture Day, the sign out front read, quote, "There are only 82 days of summer vacation," seemingly disproving the claim in the opening. The points against this, though, is that in Doof 101, after the first day of school, he says there are only 261 days left, aka the exact amount of days necessary for there to be 104 days of summer vacation. I suppose the answer here is that the different schools in Danville have different amount of days for summer vacation, and the ones Phineas and Ferb go to at least, as well as the one Vanessa goes to, has 104 days of summer vacation. You could question why it's not the same across all schools in the area, but hey, different schools, different policies. Maybe they have 104 days of summer vacation, but don't have days off for things like President's or Veterans Day or something. Anyways, now that we've established that there are, in fact, 104 days of summer vacation, let's figure out when summer vacation starts exactly. We know from a song in Roller Coaster the Musical that school begins in September, and a calendar in the final episode shows August, meaning September 1st is the first day of school. Also adding fuel onto my theory of them not celebrating holidays, as that is traditionally Labor Day. Anyways, counting back 104 days, that means May 20th is the first day of summer vacation. Something that actually lines up with the episode When Worlds Collide, where Linda tells Candace about a contract they signed 2 weeks ago to not bust more than once per day, with the date on the document being May 6th, aka perfectly matching the time period we've established so far. Now that we have the summer mapped out, is it even possible for the first 4 seasons to take place over one summer? Because there are way more than 104 episodes. In fact, there's 223 episodes in the first 4 seasons. That's way more than one summer. Heck, that's more than 2 summers. So, assuming we take this literally, does that mean Phineas and Ferb actually takes place over 3 years? Well, I suppose it wouldn't be too far-fetched. After all, it is 4 seasons. No, but seriously, the main thing here is that a number of these episodes can actually be eliminated. For starters, the Christmas and Halloween episodes expressly don't take place during the summer. The same things for the episodes in Winter Vacation. The Star Wars episode is also blatantly not canon, and there are several episodes that take place in the past. And might I add, these episodes are canon to the lore of Phineas and Ferb, as in the prehistoric episode, we actually see the same caveman that Phineas and Ferb defrost in Boyfriend from 27,000 BC. But canon or not, it definitely does not take place during the summer we are concerned with. In fact, we can basically just remove these episodes. Next, there are a couple episodes that take place on the same day. I mentioned earlier that Linda made Candace sign a contract not to bust twice in the same day. That was because they made it clear that episode actually takes place the same night as the episode Giants. On top of that, the episodes Bubble Boys and Temple of Sap take place at the same time. So combining these sorts of episodes, we can actually narrow down more and more the amount of days actually spent during this series. We can even combine less notable episodes like Ferb, which is just an episode in which Carl reads Monogram a bedtime story, because that can reasonably happen during any episode where these two don't show up. The final thing to consider here is that some episodes directly take place over more than one day. The main example I can think of is, ironically, Summer Belongs to You. While the whole plot of that special is that they're trying to have the longest day of summer ever, the opening features them dealing with a jump roping robot they created the day before. There are also plenty of episodes where they travel to far off places, something that will require long flight times for their family vacations. But just because this is Phineas and Ferb, we're going to disregard that. There could be shenanigans on how they travel, or they could simply fly at night after a super short trip for some reason and start another episode in the morning. So as impractical as that is, I'm not simply going to add more days off of speculation. In total, when the dust is settled and we factor in the 2 movies that are confirmed to happen this summer as well, we end up with exactly 208 days. AKA 2 summers exactly. Not quite what the show would lead you to believe, but if you think about it, this could actually make a lot of sense. You see, the timeline in Phineas and Ferb is a little weird. To explain why, I think it's imperative we go over the ages of Phineas and Ferb. Officially, they're only referred to being as less than 15 years old. However, in the episode Quantum Boogaloo, Candace travels 20 years into the future, and there Linda says that the boys are 30 years old, meaning they're likely 10 years old during the show. That's all well and good, until you factor in the episode Act Your Age, which takes place 10 years later, when the boys are about to head off to college, something that typically happens when they're about 18. Yet, as we've established so far, that would take place when they're 20. More reasonably, however, we find out directly from Dan Povenmire that in Act Your Age, Ferb is 19 and Vanessa is 25. This complicates things even further. Him being 19 would make more sense with him heading off to college, but with a 6-year age gap between him and Vanessa having her 16th birthday during the show, would seem to throw off the fact that this episode takes place 10 years later. Unless, of course, there are 2 summers. One where they are 9, that takes place 10 years before Act Your Age, and one where they are 10, that takes place 20 years before Quantum Boogaloo. Still not convinced? Well, there's more evidence that this is the case. Remember that contract I mentioned earlier? Well, there's no way that could be the accurate date if it's all one summer, because that episode, by nature of what it references, has to take place after these episodes. But if that date is accurate, even if we are generous and say 2 weeks doesn't have to be exactly 14 days, which would make this episode not have to take place during the first day of summer, there is no way at all to occur bare minimum in the first week of summer. Meaning this episode would have to take place in the first week of the second summer. Next, there are things that happen that are only possible if there are 2 summers, like in the episode Clipaloon Offensive, where they reference Hockey Z9, which took place during their winter break. So for it to be summer, and for them to have already experienced that, there has to be 2 summers. I have one final piece of evidence that can definitely put the nail in the coffin here. We know that in the episode Quantum Boogaloo, future Candace travels back 20 years to the first day of summer, the day they built that roller coaster. And in the episode Roller Coaster the Musical, in which they build the roller coaster again, what do we see? But the future versions of Candace, blatantly confirming that when she went back to the first day of summer, the day with the roller coaster, she was referring to the musical, and that this is the second summer. It all makes sense. The ages line up, the dates line up, and we have physical proof with future Candace having an appearance on what is apparently the first day of summer. Still, there are counterpoints to the musical being the first day, namely the fact that people reference the original roller coaster. In Roller Coaster the Musical, Carl says Doofenshmirtz built his Magnetinator at the beginning of summer, which seems to imply that it's the same summer. And in the last day of summer, Isabella says it feels like only yesterday that she walked in here and they were building the roller coaster for the first time. However, you could interpret these 2 statements differently. if the musical is on the first day of summer, then Carl saying Doof did the same thing at the beginning of summer would logically have to be referring to the summer before this. And Isabella's statement doesn't necessarily have to be talking about this summer, but just be a vague statement about how time has flied. Either way, I think there's enough here that we can get away with saying there are 2 summers, in that both summers start with a roller coaster. So, assuming there are 2 summers, let's try to map it out. First off, let's start by figuring out the years that it takes place. Now we know from Candace's birthday that July 18th was on a Friday, something that lines up with 2008, aka the year the show debuted. And a stamp on a package when Perry was mailing himself also seems to say 2008. However, the calendar on the last day of summer shows August 1st on a Thursday, which only would have happened on 2006. And in Season 5, Irving has boxes labeled all the way up to 2014. And Doof's license expired in 2012. So, I'm gonna disregard August 1st being on a Tuesday because that was just a background visual in a song. Candace's birthday also matches up to the year 2014, which would match Irving's boxes. The stamp is also hard to read and doesn't necessarily have to be the date, so I'm gonna say that if the series has 2 summers, they take place over 2014 and 2015. But if you want to say it's 2008 instead of 2014, that's perfectly reasonable. At this point, we can start figuring out which of the 2 summers the episodes take place in. Off rip, you probably thought this would be easy the same way I did. Just take the series and split it in half. Boom! Easy, right? Wrong! In fact, it is so wrong that it makes you question whether it's even possible to map it out. Or does the very nature of Phineas and Ferb mean that it has to be 1 summer? Don't understand what I mean? Let me explain. Some episodes have references, and due to this, the more the series goes on, the more complicated it gets. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's say episode 1 exists, and episode 2 references episode 1. Then let's say episode 3 references episode 2. That means episode 3 has to take place after both episode 1 and 2. You starting to get the picture here? So, we might have roughly 208 episodes to go through, aka the perfect amount for 2 summers. But will the dates shown and the references provided even allow for such a timeline to be possible? Well, let's find out. Off rip, some episodes have to take place after others, like Mom's Birthday, which directly has to take place after the episodes Roller Coaster, Are You My Mummy, The Magnificent View, Lawn Gnome Beach Party of Terror, Flop Stars, and It's About Time. But for the most part, stuff like this is fine. Where it really becomes a pain is when we factor in the major episodes, aka Summer Belongs to You and The Last Day of Summer. Because those episodes directly reference a whole slew of episodes. That immediately makes it so all of these episodes have to take place in the same summer. And a lot of other episodes could have wide-spanning implications that could make this impossible. Like for instance, there's an episode where Love Handle gets back together, meaning every appearance of them has to be after this point. That's not a problem, right? Because that happens early on in the series. But with the finale mentioning that episode took place this summer, that means it has to take place in the second summer. Because the finale is directly mentioned to have taken place on the last day of summer before season 5. Meaning there's no way around this episode taking place during the second summer. And since that episode takes place on June 15th, that means we have half the summer to fit in every appearance of Love Handle, on top of all the other episodes that reference things from the episodes Love Handle shows up in. In essence, what we have here is the second summer being a delicate balancing act, trying to fit the numerous episodes that have to take place at certain points, or episodes with lots of continuity and references. While the first summer is more or less a repository for the episodes that can take place whenever. Like Father's Day, for instance, which has to take place on Father's Day, but has no references outside of that. Or a lot of the Season 1 episodes that I guess weren't popular enough for them to bring up constantly, like Flying Fishmongers, for instance. But with all this said and done, is it possible? Unfortunately, no. It is absolutely not possible for two reasons: Norm and Irving. For the same reason, actually, Irving's first appearance, in which he meets everyone for the first time, he mentions they built a roller coaster, had a soup store, and raced bulls. While Norm's first appearance is also in the episode Grease Lightning, the episode where they raced the bulls. But that episode shows up in the montage of Summer Belongs to You. The same deal with certain episodes from the finale, which show up in the background of the big final musical number. Does that mean it's over though? Not exactly. You see, that big song in the finale has a clip from Happy New Year, showing that the clips here don't care about continuity, since even if it was all one summer, that directly takes place on the New Year's after the end of summer. This is basically just a meta song and shouldn't be taken super literally. I have no clue if the final song is canon, as they blatantly break the fourth wall a lot, but I'm gonna consider anything the lyrics reference absolutely part of the last summer, but only if they don't contradict anything, since this whole song is very meta. I mean, they straight up reference Actor Age, which takes place 10 years in the future, so. As for Summer Belongs to You, there are a bunch of flashes to previous episodes at the end of the song. Obviously, this happens out of universe, showing examples of them seizing the day during the summer. But if we say that those examples don't necessarily have to be the same summer, then we can have Grease Lightning show up in the first summer, and allow us to get the first episodes of Irving and Norm. And honestly, these justifications, I believe, are perfectly reasonable. So it really just comes down to you if you are willing to excuse this frame from Summer Belongs to You. Because if you do, then you have successfully created a full timeline of the multiple summers of Phineas and Ferb. Something that honestly, with the episodes Roller Coaster the Musical, When Worlds Collide, and Clip-A-Loon Ultimatum, actually does make a lot of sense. And make the ages given make significantly more sense. Meaning that with Season 5, we are actually on the third summer of Phineas and Ferb. Finally, for those Phineas and Ferb purists who refuse to believe it's not all one summer, I actually do have something for you as well, because there is a way that's possible. You see, in the Phineas and Ferb live-action stage show, something I actually had the privilege to see as a kid, it ends with them blasting the sun with an inator to make summer last forever. Obviously, if this is canon, that would mean it was definitely undone at some point, and the fact that they question how long the summer is definitely a point against that, but assuming you either explain that away with timeline shenanigans or an off-screen memory eraser or something, then this could definitely be an explanation for how everything could take place in one summer. But with that, I ask you, what do you think? Is it really 2 summers like I claimed, or do you believe some shenanigans went down to make it just a super long summer? I'm interested in seeing your replies, but for now, that's all I got for you today, folks. Be sure to smash that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.